In the history of U.S.-Canada relations, there are moments that whisper and there are moments that scream. What happened yesterday on the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives was not a whisper. It was a geopolitical earthquake that has cracked the very foundation of Donald Trump's America First aggression. For months, the Trump administration has operated on a single, arrogant assumption that Canada would break. That if you applied enough pressure, if you manufactured enough chaos, and if you threatened enough economic pain, Ottawa would eventually bend the knee. They were wrong. Donald Trump has just suffered a catastrophic strategic defeat, not at the hands of a foreign enemy, but from within his own fortress. In a stunning rebuke of his authority, the U.S. House has voted to move forward with repealing his illegal tariffs on Canadian goods. This is not just a legislative vote. It is a mutiny. 6 courageous Republican lawmakers crossed the aisle to join Democrats, dismantling the very weapon Trump built to hold Canada's economy hostage. This vote sends a message that is ringing through the halls of Mar-a-Lago and echoing in the Prime Minister's office in Ottawa. The era of ruling by intimidation is ending. Trump's strategy of manufactured crises, bullying allies, and weaponizing trade has hit a wall of reality. Even his own party is beginning to realize that you cannot burn down your neighbor's house without choking on the smoke yourself. The bully has been punched in the nose, and for the first time, he is blinking.
Some news now from south of the border and some breaking news that we are tracking. The U.S. House has voted against U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs on Canada. 6 Republicans joined Democrats pushing against the levies Trump slapped on Canada based on his so-called fentanyl emergency at the border. Trump quickly taking to social media, saying Canada is the worst in the world to deal with, especially as it relates to the border, adding that it has taken advantage of the U.S. for many years. And reaction from this side of the...
Let's analyze the magnitude of this failure. Donald Trump treats the Republican Party not as a political organization, but as a personal fiefdom. Loyalty is the currency. Dissent is treason. For 6 Republicans to publicly defy him on his signature policy, tariffs, is statistically rare, but politically explosive. We are breaking down one of the most damaging setbacks of Trump's presidency because it exposes a fatal flaw in his operating system. The House vote to repeal these tariffs was not symbolic theater. It was substantive, binding legislative action. It was bipartisan, and it was calculated. This reflects a growing, quiet resistance inside Washington that realizes Trump's approach to Canada is not just tough, it is self-destructive. But more importantly, we need to talk about why this happened. This didn't happen because American lawmakers suddenly developed a soft spot for Canada. It happened because Canada's long-term strategy, orchestrated under the steady hand of Prime Minister Mark Carney and Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly, has fundamentally changed the balance of power. They didn't panic. They didn't scream. They quietly explained to American businesses and lawmakers exactly how much Trump's tariffs would hurt them. Trump's tariffs on Canada were never about border security. They were never about the fentanyl crisis. Those were lies, pretexts used to bypass Congress. This was always about leverage. It was a hostage-taking strategy designed to force political concessions from Ottawa by creating economic instability. Trump tried to use the National Emergencies Act to seize power that belongs to Congress, assuming that lawmakers would be too afraid to stop him. He assumed voters would blindly accept higher prices at the grocery store. And most of all, he assumed Canada would crumble. Every single one of those assumptions has now collapsed. Instead of submission, he got rebellion. Lawmakers actually looked at the data. They listened to the auto manufacturers in Michigan, the farmers in Iowa, and the energy consumers in New England. They concluded that Trump's policy wasn't America first. It was America alone, and it was bleeding their own economy dry. The most humiliating element of this defeat for Trump is the source of the knife in his back. It wasn't the Democrats, it wasn't foreign lobbyists, it was Republicans. 6 members of his own tribe looked at the economic reality and decided that their loyalty to their constituents outweighed their fear of the president's Twitter account. This matters immensely. Trump's political influence is built entirely on the perception of absolute control, on discipline and fear. You stay in line, or you get destroyed. Yet, on this issue, Republican lawmakers chose economic survival over political submission. They looked at the chaos Trump was creating and chose stability. They looked at the inflation these tariffs would cause and chose their voters. This signals a significant weakening of Trump's iron grip. The cracks in the dam are visible, and water is starting to pour through. Trump's reaction to the vote revealed everything you need to know about his current state of mind. A confident leader, a master strategist, would have called key lawmakers, negotiated, or perhaps offered a face-saving compromise. Trump did none of that. Instead, he lashed out with the predictability of a cornered animal. He attacked Canada again. He threatened his own party members with primary challenges. He framed a disagreement on tax policy as a personal betrayal. This is not the behavior of a deal-maker. It is the behavior of a man who is losing his leverage and doesn't know what to do next. When a president has to rely on threats rather than persuasion, it is the surest sign that his authority is slipping away. He is screaming at the tide, demanding it stop coming in.
Now, President Donald Trump certainly was not happy with the outcome. In fact, in that Truth Social post, he made clear that any Republican that actually stood against him on this issue regarding tariffs, they would have consequences come election time, he said, including primaries. So what we're seeing here right now is President Donald Trump is attempting to create more of a roadblock for Republicans as we're now.
Trump is trying to spin this as a minor roadblock, a temporary glitch in the matrix, but strategic analysts know better. The resistance is not limited to the chaotic House of Representatives. The contagion has spread to the Senate, the deliberative body that usually holds the line for the president. Republican senators, figures with immense institutional power like Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and the Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, have already signaled their willingness to support the repeal. When you lose McConnell, you have lost the mechanics of the party. This means Trump now faces a two-front war in Congress. Even if Trump ultimately vetoes this bill, which he likely will, the political damage is irreversible. The veto would only prove that he is ruling against the will of the people's representatives. The message has been sent to the world. The Republican Party is no longer a monolith. They are no longer unified behind his reckless trade wars. At the heart of this shift is a brutal economic reality that no amount of rhetoric can hide. Trump has spent years selling the lie that foreign countries pay tariffs. He stands at rallies and claims China pays, Mexico pays, Canada pays. That claim was never true. It is an economic fairy tale. Tariffs are taxes on imports. Who pays the import tax? The importer. American businesses pay the tariffs. American consumers absorb the cost. American workers feel the consequences when their factories close due to high steel prices. Prices increased. Supply chains snapped. Investment capital froze because nobody wants to build a factory in the middle of a trade war. Competitiveness declined. Over time, the fog of populism lifted, and voters started looking at their receipts. They recognized that Trump's policies were costing them money, not Canadians. Lawmakers responded to that anger. This wasn't an ideological betrayal. It was practical self-preservation.
But let me ask you about, if we forget what's happening in the Senate and the House for a moment, Eric, the average American, what is the mood really? What are they saying about Trump's trade policies, especially in regards with Canada?
Well, what you're seeing now is many everyday Americans are concerned about high prices, and the Trump administration has tried to make it seem as though it is these other countries that pay these tariffs. However, this is seen as a tax on Americans because, again, it is American consumers that are paying these prices. And so what we're seeing now is because of the economy and the pall that has been over the economy, it's actually bringing down Trump's overall approval ratings. What you're seeing right now is a number of Republicans recognize that
The mood is shifting. Political analysts are now describing deep, structural fractures inside Trump's base. It's subtle, but it's there. When a movement is based entirely on disruption, on breaking things, on draining the swamp, it eventually runs out of road if it doesn't produce results. Chaos is exciting for a rally. It is exhausting for governance. Some lawmakers are quietly distancing themselves. Others are preparing exit strategies, looking at a post-Trump future. And a brave few are openly challenging his leadership. This is the natural life cycle of a chaos-based political movement. Chaos eventually stops producing victories and starts producing victims. When that happens, loyalty evaporates. Trump's tariff defeat is not an isolated incident. It is a symptom of this broader pattern of internal erosion. Now, contrast the chaos in Washington with the discipline in Canada. The reaction from the Canadian side could not have been more different or more strategic. Ontario Premier Doug Ford, often seen as a populist himself, reacted with the cool demeanor of a seasoned statesman. He welcomed the vote calmly. He didn't spike the football. He didn't mock Trump. He thanked lawmakers from both parties. He emphasized cooperation, shared prosperity, and the integrated supply chain. There were no insults, no late-night angry posts, no threats, just professionalism. This contrast matters deeply. It highlights the difference between reactive politics, flailing wildly when things go wrong, and strategic leadership, which remains steady regardless of the storm. This outcome did not happen by accident. Do not think for a second that the U.S. House woke up and decided to save Canada out of the goodness of their hearts. This is the product of months of grueling behind-the-scenes strategic planning under Prime Minister Mark Carney and his Team Canada approach. Under Carney's leadership, Canada stopped playing defense and started playing 3D chess. We expanded trade with Europe and Asia, rendering the U.S. market less singular in its importance. We strengthened global partnerships in the Indo-Pacific. We reduced our dependence on Washington's moods. We built economic resilience. We invested in credibility while Trump invested in bluster. Trump tried to weaponize Canada's dependence on the U.S. economy. He thought he held the leash, but Carney cut the leash. Trump relied on pressure. Carney created options. As a result, Canada is no longer a vassal state that can be easily intimidated. We are a diversified global player, and Trump's leverage has evaporated. This moment is the direct consequence of Donald Trump's own decisions. He chose to attack his closest allies. He chose to undermine the trust of a century. He politicized trade relations that kept millions of people employed. He ignored his own economic experts. He prioritized his ego over national strategy. Each of those choices pushed partners like Canada to diversify. Each of those choices reduced American influence on the world stage. Trump did not lose Canada by accident. He drove Canada toward independence. He pushed us away, and now that he needs us, or needs to control us, he finds we are out of reach. He is paying the price for his own arrogance. The House vote to repeal Trump's tariffs is more than just a legislative development. It is a political verdict. It confirms that his chaos-based strategy has failed. It shows the world that intimidation has a shelf life. It demonstrates that allies, even smaller ones, cannot be bullied indefinitely if they are led by smart, steady hands. And it proves that reckless leadership carries long-term consequences. Mark Carney's steady approach has strengthened Canada's position in ways that will last long after this administration is gone. Canada is more resilient, more respected, and more secure today than we were yesterday. Trump attempted to destabilize Canada. Instead, he destabilized himself. The game has changed, and Canada is winning. If you value fact-based analysis that cuts through the noise and defends Canadian interests, this is your home. Subscribe to Canada SR right now. We don't just read the headlines. We explain the strategy behind them. We expose the political theater and focus on real consequences. Hit that like button to support Canadian sovereignty. Thank you for watching, and we will see you in the next briefing.